I've seen Star Trek Prodigy Season 1 Episode 15 entitled Masquerade, so now, as usual, it's time to talk about it. This video is on a slight delay because in the United States it was Thanksgiving, so I decided to take a quick break, so happy late Thanksgiving to anyone who celebrated. Anyone else in the world who didn't celebrate it, I'm sorry this is a little late. If you're new here or just may have forgotten, there are spoilers ahead, so back out now if it's not your thing. Otherwise, on with the show. This episode picks up after the quasi-cliffhanger of last episode. If you don't recall that well, the Protostar had escaped from Captain Janeway, Admiral Janeway, I should say, in the Dauntless on the border of Romulan and Federation neutral zone. They headed into the neutral zone and the Dauntless was unable to follow, at least by order, by treaty, all that good stuff. So that was the one respite our crew was hoping for. Remember, they also have Captain Okana on board, and that's going to be one of the downs for this episode. There were a couple things that I didn't care for or were a little off to me in this episode, but I'm going to talk about a lot of the positives as well because overall I really did enjoy the direction of this episode. So what we find out in this episode is that I'm going to keep doing that, Admiral Janeway on the Dauntless is dead set on following through and going into the neutral zone to retrieve the Protostar for various reasons. Obviously, her friend Chakotay is missing. This is a ship of kids, and I am very, very happy that once she discovered there were children on this ship, her tone kind of changed. She went from assuming they were these horrible mass-murdering terrorists or whatever to immediately growing a little sympathy with them, regardless of all the stories that she's heard. And that does remind me of the Janeway of old, so I am glad to see she does have this modicum of, restraint, self-respect, intelligence, emotional intelligence, whatever you want to call it, inside of her that is still guiding her. But she wants to make sure that the Federation technology, this prototype Protostar drive, all of this high-tech stuff does not fall into Romulan hands. It's very interesting to think back because this is Captain Janeway, again, now an admiral, in command of the Dauntless. Obviously, there's been a hell of a lot of stuff that's happened off-screen between the return of Voyager, but to us, the audience, we really have not seen Janeway have to interact with real-world consequences of Alpha Quadrant politics in the entire run of Voyager. Sure, at the very beginning there was all that Maquis stuff, but then once they were lost in the Delta Quadrant, aside from a couple little instances here and there, she never really had to address the politics going on in the Alpha Quadrant, the Beta Quadrant. So it's very interesting to see her back involved with all of this geopolitical stuff in our own backyard that she was so distant from, because this is a whole new side of her. And we're also getting to see the whole new side of her in the hologram Janeway on the Protostar. So we are learning so much from this animated children's show about the character of Janeway, how she fits into the Starfleet mold in the Alpha Quadrant, how she's readjusted, all of this stuff coming at us in this ancillary show that a lot of people have written off because it's an animated show made primarily for kids on Nickelodeon, at least over here in the States. And I think that's one big downside. They're pouring all of this effort, all of these connections, all of this character depth and work into this show that I don't think is being viewed by nearly as many people as other Star Trek shows. And in my estimation, I think right now, barring maybe Strange New Worlds, which hasn't had enough time to fully flourish yet, this might be the best Star Trek show that they're producing at the moment. So there were a few things in this storyline that also advanced the entire Star Trek universe and connected things. I did mention I was not a fan of the Okana storyline in this, and I will hold out judgment a little bit, but if this is truly the end of Okana in this show, and this was just the two-part episode that he was involved with, that will look to me like a complete waste, because last episode he was fine. I liked him. This episode, he was kind of being looked up to by the crew as this more experienced guy, somebody that they should be like. And of course, Dahl was not too pleased about this because he has been growing into that captain, that leader role, even though he's not officially trained or anything like that. So he was a little put out. Why is everyone looking up to this guy? I should be the man. And obviously that was the storyline they were trying to resolve within this episode. But if that is the entirety of the reason they brought Okana on and we don't see him again, I will feel like it's a waste for this character. Out of all of the legacy characters in Star Trek they could have brought back, he wasn't necessarily that vital of a person. He wasn't a character that everyone was clamoring for. He wasn't a character that really had these ties to the vast history of Star Trek. Nothing against the actor, nothing against the character, But if they had never even referenced this person again, I don't think a lot of people out there would even have any sort of remembrance that he existed or think, what's going on with Okana? What's he up to these days? So the fact they brought him back was great, and the fact that they're trying to tell the storyline with him is great, but he came in last episode, worked with our characters this episode a little bit, and then bailed as soon as things got tough, not to be seen in the rest of the episode. And if that is truly the end of his arc on this show, I will have to throw that in a wasted opportunity category. The whole scene with the Romulans on the planet doing that, I don't know what you call it, because they were in an atmosphere in these some sort of suits, and they were doing that sort of thing that's like a space diving, skydiving thing that was made popular in Star Trek by J.J. Abrams' 2009 Star Trek. Didn't mind it there. It was kind of a cool action shot for a movie. They've since replicated it several times in Discovery. They may have even done it, I think they did it in Lower Decks as some sort of a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and I'm not sure if they've done it in another series or not. And I will point out that yes, I understand they were trying to do that in Star Trek Generations. They were going to have Captain Kirk, Admiral Kirk. Apparently I can't get ranks right today. Jump out of some sort of low Earth orbiting ship and do some sort of low orbital skydiving. So I do understand it existed as a premise in Star Trek before, but it just feels like a bit much to me. It was a fine action shot, but similar to that chase scene from last episode, it just doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't really add any stakes. It doesn't really feel exhilarating or real to me. It's just kind of, okay, they needed to put an action element here. And I know that's just a personal taste issue for me, and a lot of people probably do enjoy that, but it's just not something I need in my Star Trek show. What I did like is that they brought back the whole orbital tether, or whatever you want to call it. We've seen that a couple times in Star Trek lately, but I think the first time we had reference to it was in Star Trek Voyager, with that interesting episode with Tuvok and Neelix trying to figure out some sort of mystery while they were riding this orbital elevator. I love seeing Prime Romulans before their fall. I hate the fact that the Romulans were wiped out in Star Trek 2009. Well, not wiped out, but pretty much crippled to the point of non-existent as their own empire anymore. So I love seeing them in their prime. I guess they were Tal Shiar operatives here, trying to track down our characters who were hiding out on this rogue planet scientific refuge outside of jurisdiction of the Federation or the Romulan Empire to conduct all sorts of scientific experiments that would otherwise not be well regulated or lawful within the Federation. I don't know if they would be lawful in the Romulan Empire. Probably they would be, because they seem a little more lax and a little more willing to do what they need to do for results, but especially the Federation would not allow such things. We got to learn a couple things on this scientific community here. We got to learn that Okana is basically out for himself. No qualms there. That's definitely his character. That's basically what he would do in such a situation. I would just be sad if that's the end of his arc. What this taught our characters, this isn't the type of person they need to be looking up to, no matter how cool and swaggery he is. They need to stick together. They want to be friends. They want to be a crew. They want to do the right thing. Also, Dahl finally got some more backstory on himself. Still a little interested to see how they're going to rectify some stuff here, but in essence, he is not a race. He is not a species. He is not any other type of character we have met before in Star Trek. He is an amalgamation of all sorts of different DNA, all sorts of different genetic structures. Some sort of scientist cobbled him together to try and make this perfect specimen. My initial thought on this was that they were trying to put together a sample of all the Federation races, all the Federation species, all the Federation members into one being. I don't know when this was done, because we got to see he had Andorian traits, he had Tellarite traits, he had human traits, he had Vulcan traits, and of course, we saw that he had Klingon traits. I suppose you could say that Klingons are part of the Federation somewhat at this point. Don't know how long ago his genetic stuff was done. Obviously, there's some time travel going on. But whether or not this was supposed to be a pure Federation cobbled together of something, or just a lot of prominent Alpha Quadrant species, not sure why he would be in the Delta Quadrant, so maybe there's other species in there as well. I sure as hell hope there's no Kazon in there, but it was great for him to finally get this backstory. Now, when I mentioned that I'm not sure how this will vibe with what we've seen before, we have seen those flashbacks of him kind of having memories of his parents. So I don't know if those are implanted memories. Are they going to be something that the scientist put inside of him? Is he remembering the scientist? Is there something else going on? I don't know. But we learned that he was made using DNA techniques, augment techniques, based upon Eric Soong's research, Eric Soong's science. So now all of these Star Trek shows, animated, live action, spread throughout different periods of time, are all dealing with augments. They're all dealing in some form or another with genetic manipulation. The Khan lineage, the Soong lineage, augment lineage. I don't know if this is just because it's a well of untapped potential in the Star Trek universe, or if they're trying to build up to something greater, some grand storyline about genetic manipulation. It could be the case. Way back in the day, I had this theory that La'an from Strange New Worlds was actually going to be a direct relation to Khan. Still could pan out. I'm not sure where they're going with that. But it seems like they're doing all of this stuff adjacent to Khan, adjacent to the augments, that maybe they're planning this big overarching storyline across shows or setting up another show entirely. I don't know where they're going with this. It's just very interesting to have this thrown into all the shows completely independent of each other if they're truly not actually working together to set something up. Prodigy is throwing in all of these references. One I didn't mention, when Janeway was arguing to go into the neutral zone, she was doing so with Admiral Jellico. No reference to who he was. They didn't give any backstory on him. He was just there. They're relying on us to bring the Star Trek knowledge into the show. But if you're not bringing it into the show, if you're really a kid watching this show, your first introduction to Star Trek, you don't need to know all these things. But they're going above and beyond to make all these connections and make this feel like the realized future universe that us older fans have loved, that I just think this is what they should be doing with a lot of the modern Star Trek shows. It's not just a blatant Easter egg-a-thon like I think Lower Decks can be sometimes. They're telling their own unique story in the universe, advancing plots, advancing characters, while integrating things that make the universe seem realistic. And that is something I absolutely love. Now, I also need to get on to the big reveal at the end of the episode. So the Diviner is on the ship, the Dauntless, with Admiral, nailed it that time, Admiral Janeway and crew, and we discover this really good at her job Ensign Trill isn't actually who she seems to be. She mutates right at the end of the episode, somehow hits a computer console and activates Dreadnought. So glad he's not gone. I knew he wasn't because he's still in the credits, but that's great. I am very excited to see what happens, especially now that these people are loose on the Dauntless, not the Protostar, on the Dauntless. So now they have another Federation ship that's potentially under their control. And this Trill is actually one of the Diviner's race, and she looks at him and basically says, "You didn't think you were the only one we sent back in time, did you? You're taking too long, you're too slow. I need to get this stuff going." And that's where we end this episode. Now I am officially intrigued. I want to see what's going on with the Protostar crew. I want to find out what's going on with Dahl. I want to see what's going on with the Dauntless. I want to see all these crews come together. I'm just kind of babbling right now, but this show is doing everything that I would want a Star Trek show to do. Like I said, there were a couple of downs, specifically those two big things I mentioned. But overall, this show is just, I'm just loving it so much. But what are your thoughts about Prodigy? Are you liking it? Are you loving it? Are you disinterested, not watching it? Leave all your thoughts below. Hit a like button while you're down there. And yeah, until next time, computer and program.